When we picture the birth of modern science, we usually think of guys like Galileo and Newton, just flipping a switch from darkness to light. But the real story? Oh, it's so much messier, way more chaotic, and honestly, a lot more interesting. So let's dive into that mix, this incredibly creative period that basically weaponized the ancient world to forge our modern one. So, to really get the revolution, we first have to understand the world it completely overturned. Let's start with a question. Before the telescope, when you looked up at the night sky, what did you see? I don't just mean with your eyes, but with your mind. What was the absolute unquestioned truth about the cosmos? For almost 2,000 years, the answer to pretty much everything came from one towering figure, Aristotle. His work wasn't just influential, it was the entire operating system for how you thought about the natural world. It was the absolute core of what was taught in every university across Europe. And that brings us to our main theme. We really need to look past the simple idea of a scientific revolution and get into the nitty-gritty of the period that made it all possible, the Renaissance. The common myth, right? It kind of paints the Renaissance as this passive waiting room for modern science. But the reality, it was anything but passive. It was this dynamic, messy fusion, a time of really intense debate where all these rediscovered ancient ideas were basically weaponized against the establishment. And that created the perfect storm for a breakthrough. To see how that all went down, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of the kingdom that had to be overthrown. And I'm talking about the kingdom of Aristotle. The Aristotelian paradigm was so successful because it was a complete system. I mean, it worked like an encyclopedia for reality itself, giving a coherent explanation for everything, from why a rock falls down to how the planets move across the sky. It was the undisputed champ of the university curriculum. And this whole world was built on a few core pillars, as you can see here. The key ideas were this really strict division between the perfect, unchanging heavens and our messy, chaotic Earth, and the belief that everything existed in this finite, kind of cozy universe, with our world sitting right smack dab in the middle. It was a system where everything had its proper place. But then the challengers arrived. And here's the thing, they weren't new. They were ancient rivals, woken up from a very, very long slumber. So this is the crucial point right here. The Renaissance wasn't about writing a totally new song from scratch. It was all about taking old, forgotten tracks, these other ancient philosophies, and remixing them into something completely new, something revolutionary. So who were these rival artists in the mix? Well, a whole crew of ancient thinkers was brought back into the ring. You had Platonism, which championed mathematics. You had Epicureanism, which dropped the bombshell idea of atoms in a void. And you even had Hermeticism, which saw the world as this web of magic. Each one offered a powerful new weapon to go up against the old way of thinking. And this table really shows the clash perfectly. Just look at the debate over the most basic question you can ask. What is the world made of? For the Aristotelians, matter was just pure potential, almost nothing, waiting for some form to be imposed on it. For Platonists, it was created by God and had some reality. And the atomists, they just said, forget all that. It's just tiny, indivisible particles moving around in empty space. This huge philosophical battle happening on Earth was mirrored by an even more dramatic one up in the heavens. And it led to a complete rethinking of, well, the entire cosmos. For centuries, people believed the heavens were perfect, eternal, unchanging, made of these flawless crystal spheres. But during the late 16th century, that perfect image began to crack, both literally and figuratively. And the cracks appeared fast. First, a new star shows up in 1572, proving the heavens could change. Then, a few years later, a comet tracked by Tycho Barrage flies right through where the solid crystal spheres were supposed to be, proving they just didn't exist. All while philosophers were launching attacks on the old ideas, and thinkers like Giordano Bruno were pushing things to their radical and, in his case, fatal conclusion. Just remember that old model for a second. A cozy, finite, layered universe with a single, unmoving center, Earth. It was a cosmos with a clear up and down, a perfect structure, a place for absolutely everything. And then came the intellectual gut punch from thinkers like Bruno. The spheres are broken. The hierarchy between heaven and earth is gone. And maybe most terrifying of all, there is no center. Humankind was suddenly contemplating this absolutely shocking and dizzying new reality, the shift from a closed, finite world to an infinite universe. A cosmos with no boundaries, no center, and maybe even other worlds out there? This huge change in what people thought was driven by an equally profound change in how they thought. A whole new way of knowing was being born. See, the old toolkit for knowledge was all about studying a very limited set of approved ancient books and their commentaries. Authority came from the text. The new toolkit, though, was all about action. Yeah, it meant retranslating old sources with a critical eye, but it also meant getting your hands dirty with direct observation in these brand new botanical gardens, collecting specimens from the New World, and this is crucial, actually listening to the practical knowledge of people a professor would never have talked to before: sailors, fishermen, and artisans. So, this new process was a really powerful combination. It started with that humanist skill of philology, reading old texts with a critical eye. But it didn't stop there. You then had to go observe nature for yourself. You had to collect new data from all over the world. And you had to listen to people with actual practical experience. It was this amazing fusion of the library, the laboratory, and the docks. This new spirit was just perfectly captured by the philosopher Tommaso Campanella. He declared, "I learned more from the anatomy of an ant or an herb than from any book ever written." The ultimate authority was shifting from the ancient page to the book of nature itself. So the crucial takeaway from all this is that the journey to modern science wasn't some clean, straight line. Renaissance natural philosophy was more like a bubbling cauldron of ideas, a messy, creative, and sometimes contradictory fusion of rigorous observation, revived ancient philosophy, Christian theology, and even magic. And what all this really reminds us is that the quest for knowledge, this big push to understand our world, it rarely follows a neat and tidy script. It's often in the messy collisions of old and new ideas that the most profound breakthroughs happen, which, leaves us with a final thought. What comfortable orthodoxies, what unchallenged Aristotelian systems are we questioning today?